Okay, this is an instructional video that will show you how to utilize and score the Niagara College Therapeutic Recreation Observation Form. So I'm just going to tell you a couple of things about this form before I walk you through the different steps. So this is an in-house tool that was created to be used by students, both while they're in the program and if they think it's a useful tool. You're certainly welcome to use it afterwards in your practice. But it was designed to help us observe and then record and analyze an individual's functional skills and abilities. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is make sure you've got a copy of the form handy while you're watching this video and to follow along while I explain the different elements of the form. Alright, so you'll see that it's a 4-page tool and that it's divided into different sections. There's a section on gross motor functioning, fine motor functioning, cognitive functioning, social functioning, affective functioning, and sensory functioning, and then a summary spot at the end. So one of the things that's really important is for you to make sure you take a good look at the actual form itself before you observe somebody and record information on it. It's really important that you know what all the different skills are that are included in each of the sections, so that while you're doing your observations you can quickly flip to those sections and make notes and scores when you observe those skills. Okay, so you will be using one of these forms for each observation that you do. So the form is designed to just be used for one specific activity that you observe somebody in. So again, you want to become really familiar with the form before you use it, and then you would fill out one form for each activity. So I'm going to walk you through now some of the key elements of the form. So the first thing that you want to do is record some information at the top for each form. So you're going to fill in who it is that you were observing, the date that you actually observed that individual in that activity. The next section is for you to provide some information about the specific activity that you're observing. And the more information you can provide there, the better, because it helps understand some of the context for the scores and the comments that might come later. So you definitely want to make reference to what the actual activity is. Was it something that that individual was doing alone, with a small group, with a large group? Where did the activity happen? How long did they participate in the activity for? So some of those key things. I have used, for the purpose of this explanation, a pretend activity of building a house of cards. Okay, so here under activity, setting, and situation, I have written building a house of cards with 3 peers in a classroom setting for 30 minutes. And then observed by would be your name, the person who actually filled in the form. The next thing that is important for you to familiarize yourself with, again, before you do an observation, is the actual rating scale that's used. So for each skill that you're observing, it's a 5-point rating scale. And so what you want to do is read across, because there's different descriptors for each of the scores. So depending on what the skill is that you're observing, a 5 might mean excellent, that they did really well in that skill, or it might mean that something always happened. So if it was something like wins appropriately, for example, did they always demonstrate that they can win appropriately? Or needs no guidance. So again, depending on the specific skill, the descriptor for 5 might be that they did that excellently, that they always did that, or that they needed no guidance. Okay, so 5 is the highest level of skill, and then you'll see that it goes down 4, 3, 2, and 1, with 1 being poor, or that they never demonstrated that particular skill. So again, winning appropriately, did they, in a situation where they won, did they never demonstrate the ability to win appropriately? And the final column needs constant guidance. Okay, so again, you want to familiarize yourself with that rating scale. The last part of the rating scale is important, which is an NA. If you think about pretty much any recreational activity, it would be rare for every single skill that appears on this form to be something that is an element of every recreational activity. And so for any skill where that is not applicable because of the activity, or if it's something that just did not take place in that activity, not observed or not applicable, you can't then give it a rating. So you need to make sure that you put an NA in the appropriate spot. Okay, that's really important. So I'm going to walk you through how to fill out the first two sections on this form, and then I'll show you the summary sheet as well. So again, this is our House of Card building activity, and we've got Bob Smith who was taking part in this. So the first section is gross motor functioning. If you think about a house of cards, building a house of cards, there are not a lot of gross motor skills that are required for that activity. So you will see that there are a whole lot of, zoom in the wrong way, a whole lot of NAs that have been recorded for this particular activity. Okay, we weren't able to assess Bob's gross motor strength or coordination or endurance, and so a lot of NAs. There were 3 gross motor skills though: flexibility, balance, and the ability to assume basic body positions that had a score. Okay, and that was 4, 5, and 5. So those scores are recorded, and then in the summary box below that, you're going to total up those scores. Okay, so in this case we had a 4, a 5, and a 5, which equals 14. The next line for all of them is the number of factors rated. So for the B section here, you need to exclude anything that had an NA. So even though there's 11 gross motor items on the sheet, only 3 of them were rated. Okay, so you're going to put a 3 in there. So we've got 14. In the first box, that's our total number of items rated was 3. C asks you then to divide. So if we take 14 divided by 3, the score that we get for the average of gross motor functioning is 4.7. Okay, here's a little hint to help you know whether you have done the math correctly. Those totals in C should never be more than 5. Okay, that should never be more than 5. And then what you want to do once you've got that score is you want to provide some summary comments related to gross motor functioning. So in this case, what I've written was that few gross motor skills were required for this activity. Bob was able to stand and sit with no difficulty. Once when reaching across the table, he had trouble fully extending his arm. So that is explaining really why he got a 4 on flexibility and a 5 on the other 2 items. So you want to, especially when there's something that was particularly excellent or scored lower than might be expected, you want to provide some comments by way of explaining that. Okay, so that's gross motor functioning. Similarly with fine motor functioning. Now, building a house of cards is requires a lot more fine motor skills than gross motor skills. So you'll see in that section, there was a score for each of the 4 items. Okay, we've got a 5, a 5, a 3, and a 5. Total that up equals 18, divided by the number of factors, which was 4. And so we end up with a score of 4.5 for Bob's fine motor functioning. Comments associated with that was that Bob was able to pick up and hold the cards with no difficulties. At times he did not line up the cards with accuracy, causing the house to collapse. So again, that would explain the lower score in fine motor functioning. So that's section 1 and section 2. Section 3, cognitive functioning, and 4, social functioning. Here, for the purpose of this video, I've just said you want to fill in all of that page as well. So just the same way you did it on the first page, you want to make sure that you've captured cognitive and social functioning in the same way. And then likewise with affective and sensory functioning. Okay, you want to make sure that you fill all of that in. And then I'm going to spend a little bit of time here talking about the summary page. So this is the back page that that captures sort of an overall view of Bob's skills associated with the House of Card building. So I filled this in as an example. Again, this is assuming that we filled in page 2 and 3, which I didn't actually do that in this example, but I have just pretended that I've got some scores for that. All right, so now what you're going to do is you're going to transfer the information from the first 3 pages over to the summary page. So right at the bottom here, that's the first thing you want to do. So you want to take the average score, which is the total from box C for each of the sections. Okay, so in gross motor functioning, that total score was 4.7. For fine motor functioning, it was 4.5. And then I made up these for the other ones. But you want to take all of the item C's for each of the sections and record them in there. So you've got the numerical value there. But what is often helpful with assessment tools like this is to have a visual as well. So that's what this provides above. It basically just takes those numbers and asks you to plot them on a bar graph. I would encourage you to use a ruler for each of those lines, and then I've used a highlighter there to shade it in. You could use a pen or something to that effect, but I just find when that's shaded in, it gives more of a visual than just a line across. Okay, so I would encourage you again to make that as neat as possible. Below that are several lines where you're asked to provide a summary of skills or functional abilities for that activity. So my note off to the side there is that I want you to provide a summary overview of the observed skills from the first 3 pages, really highlighting the key points. Okay, so over here I would anticipate that each of these lines would be fairly well filled in, and again highlighting, summarizing the key things that you found while observing the activity. So again, pulling out some of the key things that the individual did well, and then if there were any areas that were scored lower, anything that's sort of worth noting, that again in TR practice might be some of the kinds of things that you would focus on with that individual. So you definitely want to highlight some of the key strengths, and then if there are any areas that could be improved. Okay, so you're going to fill that in neatly, and then at the bottom, again, the date of the observation and the signature of the person that observed it. Now, one thing I will note in you using this with your peers is because you're not working in a TR setting where people would in all likelihood have some lower scores in some of these areas, and that's why they're seeking TR services. I would anticipate that for many of your peers and many of the activities, the scores will really be quite high. So don't see that as an area of concern if your partner scores high in many of the areas. But do try to be as objective as possible when you are filling this in, and really think about each of the skills and what you observe your partner actually demonstrating. All right, so in summary, you want to make sure that you are well familiar with this observation form before you use it. You're going to fill out one observation form for each activity that you have observed. You're going to fill in the form completely, including doing the math accurately as described, including detailed comments in each of the sections, and then making sure that the summary sheet on the back as well is fully completed. And if you do that, that will give you a really full, accurate picture of an individual's functional skills and abilities. Again, this is something that you are using in this course, but it is not a copyrighted tool. You are welcome to use this in practice if you think that this is a useful tool for where you might be working. And that is the Niagara College observation form.